Yes. Today we'll be talking about things that I find exquisite. Just kidding. Hi, my name is Smoke and Ash, and I'm really glad you could be here with me today. I know we don't know each other too well yet, so go ahead and make yourself comfortable. So I don't know if you know, but I just played this game called Braid, and it's really interesting. The gameplay, the narration, Actually, I've got a few notes on it. Let's think about Braid. I'm going to talk about some of the topics that I introduced in my first video, which is here if you're interested in watching it, and Braid actually covers quite a few of them, so let's get started. I will say that I was very confused as to what I was supposed to be understanding about Tim, the main character, on his adventure to save his princess. Initially, of course, I thought the princess was the woman he was enamored with, maybe a girlfriend or his fiancée, but as the narrative unfolded and Tim was constantly told his princess was in another castle, the princess seemed to be less of a concrete person and more of an idea. Not only that, but what I assume was Tim's own inner monologues became muddled and concerning. What began as Tim acknowledging a mistake he made that turned his princess away from him and into the arms of a monster became a story among stories, narratives overlapping and seemingly unrelated to the larger story, yet contributing to the steep slope of uneasiness that progresses through the game until the very end. Oh, and just in case you haven't played it, I'm gonna let you know there will be spoilers ahead. Sorry. My favorite part of the game had to be at the end, where all the pieces were supposed to come together. Not only with the completion of each puzzle in the game, but also with the strewn about pieces of narration finally being sewn together. However, while the game offered an ending that I almost expected, Tim constructing a fantasy in which he is a hero saving a princess when in actuality his princess was running from the monster he had become, for lack of better prose. There turns out to be a much broader narrative than I expected. My initial analysis of the game as I played it was simple. A man pushes a woman away by making mistakes and refuses to acknowledge this until the very end. In that case, the gameplay can be seen pushing Tim, or the player, to learn from their mistakes through the manipulation of time. I mean, who wouldn't want to be able to reverse the mistake while still learning and not having to deal with the scorn of loved ones and people who care about you? In each of the worlds, you're put in a position to manipulate time in new ways in order to get through it. At one point, time slows down when you take off what is suggested to be your wedding ring, which also implies that despite Tim being married, he's still pursuing a lost love, his princess, with reckless abandon, even when he has someone who loves him and waits for him despite all of this. Each of these worlds can be read into in similar ways, depending on the narrative that is revealed beforehand. However, after doing some investigation, it seems that I was so focused on the microscopic or smaller possibilities of the game that I missed the macroscopic perspective. In an interview with Jonathan Blow in the AV Club, Blow explains that his intentions and thoughts for the game were much larger than one man, the woman he was pursuing, and the realization that the hero was a potential villain in his own story. As an individual that pursued an English major and computer science major at one point in time, he viewed Braid as a union of science and philosophy, a game that investigates humanity and its concepts of free will and existence while existing in a world of unquestionable and consistent structure. That was a mouthful. He explained that everything in Braid has a purpose, and that's why it's short and to the point. There was no reason to add any distracting elements like one might find in an open world game. It was a simple puzzle game with a complex narrative, like simple science intermingling with the complexity of emotion and what it is to be human. He goes on to talk about a lot more interesting concepts and topics regarding the game, but I don't really have a lot of time for that, so if you're interested in reading more, please click the link in the description below. In regards to thought or emotionally provoking material, I think Braid fulfills both requirements. Not only does the narrative give the player something to really think about, especially as you venture further into the game, but there's also a subtle unsettling feeling that accompanies the confusion. The writing is simple, yeah, but it's intentionally simple to get Tim's mindset across. Tim is off on a search to rescue the princess. She has been snatched by a horrible and evil monster. This happened because Tim made a mistake. To Tim, these are simple facts of his journey. There's a princess that he has to save from a horrible and evil monster, not just one or the other. The fact that he takes the time to distinguish both of those could actually mean a lot. Like, just because you're evil doesn't necessarily mean you're horrible, and just because you're horrible doesn't necessarily mean you're... Anyway, we're gonna move on. As the game goes on, the narrative becomes way more complicated, going from an individual's thought on his relationship to a broad, worldly look on every relationship, on the mistakes people make, on the possibility of erasure of those mistakes. If you're willing to look into that, it's definitely intellectually stimulating, and then emotionally so when you realize Tim is possibly an abusive lover that is obsessed with getting with a woman no longer interested in him. There are even some people who think the game might be referencing the creation of the atomic bomb, and there are a whole lot of other ideas, so if you're interested in that, I really advise looking into it. I would have to say the most interesting part of the game was the very end of it, where instead of going forward through a backwards landscape to save the princess, you reverse time to reveal that your actions were trying to stop her from getting away from you, and caused her to run into the arms of the monster, which turns out to be her knight. Dang. When it comes to utilizing the gaming platform, come on. Do I even have to explain it? Like, I guess I will. The way each beginning narrative abstractly illustrates how you will be using time manipulation in that world is almost like a subtle introduction to the tutorial in each of the first rooms. Whether you are moving backwards in time by going left after you hear about Tim reverting to his childhood, or you are using your own wedding ring to distort time around it in the way that you are distorting the perception of yourself without it. Again, my personal favorite, where you reverse time almost as if Tim is rethinking his actions to find out that Tim actually pushed his princess away from him. So when you start playing, you think you're helping her, but when you go back, you realize you are hindering her the entire time. The only negative thing I could say based on my personal experience with the mechanics is that the time penalty was incredibly frustrating. Part of why my Let's Plays were so long had to do with the fact that every time I made a mistake, I had to wait, and wait, and wait for the opportunity to try again. But that could just be attributed to my personal impatience and lack of skills, so we're gonna ignore that. I think it's safe to say the game discusses the human condition in the way it approaches our questioning of our existence, our faults, our relationships, and things out of our own control. It brings to question the possibilities of time, of remembering a future that will never be, but still learning from its mistakes. Blow also approaches the idea of true love and destiny against the idea of science and reality. How much of our will is truly free will, and how much of it is destined? Is God truly in control? And if so, how in control is she or he? Are we all machines without any true higher function? But how can that be when the very idea of it creates a miasma of depression? I think I might have gotten a little bit carried away. I think it's safe to say its approach to concept and gaming mechanics, whether it was intentional or not, is incredibly unique and captivating. There are so many debates over what the text means, what Tim is, whether this is just a conversation about a breakup or the atomic bomb, and so much more. And because of all this discussion, I can't help but believe this definitely qualifies as art. Though Blow did say creating art was not his intention when creating Braid, he has started a discussion that has resulted in so many different conclusions. Even my own initial analysis of the game before I researched was much simpler than what he had in mind. He even says that hardly anyone has come close to truly grasping what the game means, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are incorrect. Art is meant to be discussed. There is no right or wrong when you're thinking about what art could possibly mean. It's incredibly subjective, and it's impossible to look at anything without applying your own thoughts and experiences into it. And what's awesome about it, no matter what you come up with, even if it's totally different than what the artist initially meant for it to be, it doesn't make your argument any less valid. What you think it still is, because that's how you feel about it. It only adds to what the art piece is and could possibly be. Although it is always good to do more research so that you can think about it even more and find new ways to appreciate the art you're looking at or video game you're looking at. Research can only make you appreciate the art and the artist more and find new ways of interpreting it. But that's what makes art so great. It gets you interested in something and then you're learning for the fun of it and no other reason. I love learning, so anything that promotes learning is awesome. And I personally would love to make more games that influence learning. But I think I might have rambled enough. All in all, Braid is an amazing game, and I highly recommend anyone with patience plays it. And whether or not Jonathan Blow intended to make an art piece, he definitely made a game that makes people think, and that is enough for me. His final statement in the interview wraps up everything rather nicely, so I think I'll share it here. I have gone on record as talking about game design as a practice, like a scientific study or like a spiritual practice, like yoga or Tai Chi. And that's part of what I'm doing when I design a game, is that I'm exploring the universe in a certain way. I'm trying to understand true things about it, or to uncover things about it in ways that are less bullshitty than just writing words on paper. Because somehow there is something more meaningful about creating a system, because the universe is a system of some kind, and writing is not a system. So what do you guys think? Do you agree that Braid is art, or do you think it's just an interesting game? Is it about relationships, or is it about atomic bombs? Or is it about something else entirely? What about using game designs as a way to explore the universe and all of its possibilities? Well, please let me know in the comments below on Facebook, on Twitter, Tumblr, wherever you feel comfortable. I really hope you enjoyed my half of our discussion, and I cannot wait to hear what you guys think about Braid. I'll see you all later!